Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse, but actually enjoy it. And today's video is going to be another one of those unscripted videos where I just sit in front of the camera, no writing, no research, just me talking to you to tell you about something that I recently discovered. And you don't expect one of these epic 6-part video series explaining all of the secrets of the universe, because that's not what's going to happen today. But it may involve that, because every time I embark on one of those missions to produce something like that, it starts with one thing that just gets in my head and sticks there, and I can't stop thinking about it. And this may be one of those things, but then at the same time, it may not ever be anything. Maybe just what I tell you today is all you need to know. But it involves a recent purchase I made. Now this here is the Bible Atlas that I've been using for probably 15 or 20 years. It's produced by Jehovah's Witnesses. It's called See the Good Land. And look, it's just a Bible Atlas. It's not like it's a wicked Bible Atlas or the world's best Bible Atlas. It's just a Bible Atlas. I've always liked it. But I got to thinking, recently I was on eBay and I saw a Bible Atlas for like 50 cents. With shipping and everything, it was $4, $5. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'm being fooled. Maybe there's something about this here Jehovah's Witness Atlas that's, got some kind of hidden agenda to it. So in order to check that, maybe I need to get this here Bible Atlas produced by the world. Well, the reality is that every church has their own little religious agenda. And so I knew when I got this that this was not going to be better than this, but it might be different. So whatever agenda this guy has, if it doesn't match the agenda of this guy, I can see where things don't match. I can do a little research and usually uncover a lie that's being told on purpose. Although initially I thought there's no way that this could be part of a lie. And in fact, I don't think it is. Basically, if you buy a Bible Atlas from the Baptists or the Catholics or the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's going to be the same stuff, because they've been repeating the same story over and over again, and there's not any real reason to think that there's something about the map that will, damage your faith. But anyway, even though I haven't found any real differences between the two, I did come across something that I had never seen before simply because it was there. And we'll talk about that in a minute. First thing is what we're going to be talking about today is where Jesus came from. A while back, I made a video called "Where Did Jesus Come From?" that's about where he came from before he came to earth. But this is about where did Jesus come from? Where did Jesus grow up? Because in the Bible it says he's called a Nazarene because he was from Nazareth. The Bible says he was called a Galilean, and that he was born in Bethlehem. And the stories about his birth are just insane if you go to church and listen to them. It's like his mom got on a beast of burden when she was 9 months pregnant, and she rode that thing from their house, which was up here, right near the Sea of Galilee, all the way down here. That's like riding I don't know, was it a donkey? Riding a donkey all the way from the northern tip of New Jersey to the southern tip of New Jersey. It's just that's not a reasonable story. Now, there are stories in the Bible about some incredible feats of strength. If you've, read anything about Samson, you know that. And there are miraculous things, but it just didn't make any sense. I couldn't see any purpose in her riding that far on that animal. So, here's the next thing we need to understand. In the ancient past, all of the places that existed were, lost to time. And it didn't take a long time. We're not talking about castles and pyramids. We're talking about grass huts, structures that were nothing even like our houses today. So we're talking about stuff that in a very short amount of time would simply disappear. And that happened pretty quick. because by the time Constantine came on the scene, Constantine was the emperor of Rome that created the Catholic Church. In fact, the Catholic Church today, I think, acknowledges Constantine as the person that created them. Is a very, very wicked man. And he was a political ruler. He was the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire. And as part of his establishing himself as the ruler of the world, he had to come up with these stories about the areas that he covered. Now, he was holding up this Bible, the Latin Vulgate, and telling people that he was the king of that. So within the pages of that Bible are stories about a whole lot of places that would fall under the jurisdiction of the keeper of the faith, which would have been him. So he could easily manipulate his population to support him in any wars, to go in and kill people that lived in any of the areas that were in the Bible. So what happened, he sent his, and this here is not covered in the Bible, it's just a part of secular history, may or may not be true, but Constantine set out a group of people to go locate these different areas. And the one who ruled over those expeditions was his mother. And basically, we're talking about people that are evil. They're not going to waste a lot of time reading the Bible, but they are going to have people read it for them and tell them the names of where Jesus was born and so on and so forth. And then she would go out and say, okay, this is Mount Sinai. This is Nazareth. And that really is how it happened. And, in our day, we have archaeologists that are going through there and proving that the Bible's all a lie because none of those places are where they're supposed to be. But they're just proving that Constantine's mama was a liar. But even if we're reading the Bible and we look at some of the places that Constantine's mama picked out, it's very obvious pretty quickly that they can't possibly be the right location. Like just the story of Nazareth. Jesus went back to Nazareth. I think it's where he picked up he went into the synagogue and he picked up the scroll of Isaiah and he read from it and he said, "This is me." And everybody in there got mad, and so they tried to throw him off of a cliff. Well, if you go to modern day Nazareth, there are no cliffs. There's not even any really tall hills. So it's just, anybody with any sense knows that the Nazareth where billions of tourist dollars are spent every year is not the Nazareth of the Bible. In the ancient past, the words that we associate with proper names were actually descriptive. If you go back and you look, every single person and place in the Bible that we think has a proper name, if you look at those proper names, they're actually just a word or groups of words which mean something. And just as an example of one I use quite often because it's an easy one is the word Adam. Adam means the red earth or the red clay, but it also gets used in the Bible to mean human being. Now, we know that our first father, way, way, way back in time, was named Adam. He was Adam. But the word Adam in the original Hebrew language is used throughout the Bible to also simply describe human beings. So if you're reading a Bible and it talks about man, in the sense of mankind, if you look that word up in a concordance, it will tell you that the original word there was Adam. And so that causes some problems because sometimes the names of proper places, which also have meaning, are not actually describing a definite physical location on the earth. And that may be by design. In the Bible, we're told that Michael, the archangel, battled against Satan over the body of Moses. So that doesn't make any sense to us in the modern world, and we really can't imagine why that would even be important. But one theory that I've heard that seems to make sense is that if they had allowed that body to be put somewhere where everybody knew where it was, that everybody in Israel for the next 3,000 years would make a pilgrimage to go rub their nose on a stone over the grave or something. And God didn't want that. And that sounds reasonable. And so it's possible that all of these names in the Bible that are descriptions are not really proper places because God did not want his people to waste their time, purchasing airplane tickets to go visit these places. Now, the names of the places where Jesus supposedly grew up that we're familiar with are he was born in Bethlehem, but he was from Galilee, and he was called Nazarene because he was from Nazareth. I made a video a while back called Nazarite. It was about my hair, and it was simply explaining the fact that the word Nazareth in the Bible actually simply means set apart place. It's a Hebrew or a Roman or Greek word that means, not even a Greek word, it's actually a Hebrew word that is a Greek version of a Hebrew word. It simply means set apart place. And there were a lot of words that meant set apart. You know, the one I'm talking about now is Nazir. That word was used to describe men like Samson. In the ancient past, they had a system of someone setting themselves apart as a holy man, because Nazir often gets translated as holy, set apart, holy. And in that ritual, they had to the man would have to shave his hair. I guess a man or a woman could shave their hair and then never cut it again, or not cut it until a predetermined time. And then they weren't allowed to touch any bodies, and they were not allowed to drink anything made out of grapes. There was a few things that they had to do. But there were other people who seemingly were called Nazarites, simply because they were set apart. They were different than everybody else, even though they didn't perform that Nazarite ritual. Well, there are other words in the Bible that mean set apart, and one that's really, really popular is Kadesh. You know, I think I've heard people say Kadesh Pneuma, because Kadesh is set apart, and Pneuma is spirit, so that's the Holy Spirit, Kadesh Pneuma, I think. But, you know, I've had this argument before with people that Nazir means set apart, Kadesh means set apart. People are like, no, it means holy. You know, it could be set apart bad or set apart good, but Kadesh and Nazir both mean set apart good. There's no such thing as set apart bad. Well, if you go back and look at the book of Job, the word Kadesh gets translated in there, I think, as sodomite. You know, Job's talking about all the throwaway people of society being forced to live together. There's these trashy people, and one of those groups is called the Kadesh. And you won't find that by looking up Kadesh in your Bibles. You're going to have to go to a Hebrew concordance, look the word up, and then look up several words, because there's Kadesh that's spelled with an A, Kadesh that's spelled with an E, and I mean Kadesh or Kedesh. And both of those words, if you look them up, they say holy or set apart. And yet it's very obvious from the way it's used that sometimes people are set apart in a way that we would not consider holy. So, the whole thing is that we're looking at the meanings of these names to determine if Nazareth was in fact a place, a actual physical place, a proper noun, proper name of a place, or if Nazareth is simply a description. Well, here's something to keep in mind. In the ancient past, there were plenty of places called Kadesh, and that's in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, but when the New Testament was written, they changed over from Hebrew to Greek. There are no Kadeshes mentioned in the New Testament. In the ancient past, in the Old Testament, there were no places called Nazareth, but in the New Testament we see that Jesus came from Nazareth. Now here's the part that's kind of tricky. This is the reason that this book was even mentioned, is when I picked this up, for whatever reason, the very first thing I see is the word Kadesh. And there it is, right there, Kadesh. Now, the reason that this kind of shocked to me is because I was not aware up until a few days ago that there were more than one Kadesh. The Kadesh we're always told about is Kadesh Barnea. It's way down here at the very bottom. So you can see that right there. And this right here. Those are very obviously not even close. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to look up this word Kadesh and just see, which one, if one of these could be Nazareth, because this top one that I'm pointing at is right above the Sea of Galilee. So if Jesus was from Galilee, perhaps this, this is the Kadesh of, this is a Kadesh of Berea. and this is the Kadesh of Galilee. So he could actually be from Nazareth if Nazareth was Kadesh, or just a set-apart place, and still be from Galilee if it was the Kadesh of Galilee. And what's really interesting is that over here is actually a Bethlehem. We really don't know where Bethlehem is. Bethlehem was found by Constantine's mother or somebody back then, and it's actually Bethlehem Ephrathah. But if we look at what those words mean, then it may be that there is no such place as Bethlehem Ephrathah, because we know that it says that David was born in Bethlehem Ephrathah, and if you follow the description in the Bible, it would have to be down here somewhere, because it very clearly says that he was born in Bethlehem Ephrathah of Judea. You know, back in the day, this area was divided up into 12 tribes, and Judea was down here. It was not up here. But eventually, the 10 northern tribes were carted off into slavery. And all that was left was Judah and Benjamin, and they're down here in the south. But when that happened, what ended up happening was that this area was called Samaria, this part was called Judea, but the entire area, according to Roman culture, was Judea. So now, even though Bethlehem of Judea in David's day would be here and not up here, after the Romans came in, any Bethlehem anywhere in here would be Bethlehem of Judea. And why this is important can be found in our Bibles. And this is really the only point I'm trying to get to. And so if you haven't been paying attention, you can start paying attention now, because this is the sacred secret that I'm ready to share. Is that Bethlehem, it actually comes from the Hebrew word Beit Lechem. Now, Concordance says what that means is house of bread. But in our day, you know, the word house is a physical structure. Back in the ancient past, Ba'ith could mean a structure or a family. You know, you're from the house of Smith or Jones. That's from that house. But it could also be a structure. But the word lechem, I did a video a while back called Bible Food, where I explained that lechem is not bread, because it gets translated throughout the Bible as a whole lot of different things that are not the same. Like, it's called cakes and it's called bread, and certainly those two could be the same thing, but it's also translated as meat. And the point that they're trying to make with this word lechem is that it's a class of food that's different from another class of food. Well, the other class of food is proper food, and that would include things that were given to Adam to eat, like from the trees of life. That would be proper food. Improper food would be any food that requires labor to make. So making bread or making a steak would require physical labor. Proper food that does not require physical labor. Improper food that does require physical labor. Now, if we look at all of the accounts of Jesus' birth, there's another detail that's brought out, is that when Jesus was born, they were on a trip, and there was no place to put the baby, so they put him in an animal trough, a feeding trough for animals. It's called a manger in most English Bibles. So if we go back and look, sure enough, that Greek word that we translate as manger means crib for animal feed. And so we have accounts that say that Jesus was born in the house of improper food, but we also have accounts saying he was placed in a manger. It's very likely that this is not a physical location so much as a description. Now, we have more details in the fact that David was born in Bethlehem Ephrathah, and there are prophecies that say that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem Ephrathah. Now, if we consider the fact that Jesus was born in the place of improper food, and then he was placed in a feeding trough for animals, that word Ephrathah could play into that as well. What Ephrathah means is fruitful. So in original Hebrew, it would not be improper to say that David and Jesus were both born in the fruitful house of improper food. And this is very likely a prophetic name based on the fact that our earth is fruitful. It was designed to be fruitful. There were the fruit from the trees of life in the Garden of Eden. In the book of Revelation, it says that the fruit from the trees of life will be available again 12 months a year. And yet here we are on a planet that has no trees of life. So Jesus being born in the house of improper food would be appropriate, but calling it the fruitful house of improper food would be appropriate as well, because it would be his rulership that would lead us into the paradise once again. The word Galilee means circuit. Now, it seems very obvious to me when I'm reading the Bible that there really was a Sea of Galilee in the ancient past, and that the word Galilee doesn't mean circuit, but actually is a physical location, but then again, maybe not. Several verses in the Bible say that Jesus returned to Galilee, when it could actually be saying that Jesus returned to his circuit, his preaching circuit. And a lot of times in the Bible, both will be true. Jesus will return to Galilee because it's trying to tell people who are deeply seeking truth that Jesus returned to the circuit, but he also really physically went back to Galilee. Now, here's the part that's really cool. This is the absolute, this time not just leading you on. This word Kadesh that I'm associated with Nazareth, Kadesh, the set-apart place in the Hebrew language, Nazareth, the set-apart place in the, in the Greek version of the Hebrew word, are the same place, and there is a very specific mention of what a Kadesh was used for in the ancient past. When the Israelites received the law code, not the Ten Commandments, but the law of Moses, it left instructions about how to treat someone who had killed another person. And it says, if someone is a murderer, you put them to death. But if someone kills a man or a woman by accident, then that person would be required to flee to what's called a city of refuge. And so the cities of refuge that existed in that promised land, in the nation of Israel, were areas that were set apart in order for people who accidentally committed a homicide or killed a person to run, because they would have someone who was called the Avenger of Blood, and if you ever came out of that city and the Avenger of Blood found out about it, he had the legal right to murder you. Now, and I know that that's what this Nazareth is, this Kadesh is, because even though there is no Kadesh of Galilee mentioned in that instruction about where to build these cities of refuge, later on, in describing Galilee, it says that there would be the Kadesh of Galilee for the killers. So here we go. We're given instructions about where to put these places, and one of those places is called Kadesh. It's not Galilee. Later in another verse, when it mentions Galilee, it talks about the Kadesh of Galilee for killers. So Jesus, for whatever reason, was living in a city of refuge. That's what Nazareth was. Now, there's prophecy that says that Jesus would be considered a criminal, and that prophecy supposedly was fulfilled when he was executed as a criminal, but it may be that Jesus had been considered as a criminal for his entire life. Now, do we know from these scriptures that Jesus killed somebody by accident before he, entered into Jerusalem? Because he was gone for a long time. He showed up when he was about 30 years old. First thing he did was get baptized, get baptized, and then he went out into the wilderness, and he stayed out there for 40 days fasting, and then he made his entry into Jerusalem. But here's the thing. The rules for manslayer, if Jesus had accidentally killed somebody, the rule was that he could not come out of the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. At the death of the high priest, all sins were forgiven. Whoever was assigned the task of being the avenger of blood would no longer have the legal right to kill anybody that went into a city of refuge. But when Jesus came out, no high priest had died. We have very, very consistent records of who the high priests were for a long period of time. And one of those is Josephus. Josephus recorded every high priest that he was aware of and what day they took their position and who was a high priest before and what the circumstances were in the removal of that high priest. And the only two that are mentioned by Josephus are Annas and Caiaphas. Caiaphas was appointed by the Roman authority, and he was appointed as a replacement for Annas, and yet Annas was still alive. In the Bible, Annas is called the high priest, and Caiaphas is called the high priest, even though, according to the Roman high authority, Caiaphas was the only high priest. Now, the rules in the Bible for appointing high priests were not the rules that they followed. You know, this was a governmental position. They were installed by the Roman authority, and so they really wouldn't have accounted anyway. But there is nothing in the Bible, nothing in secular history to indicate that any high priest had died around the time that Jesus came out of the city of Refuge. Now, here's some of what, these are some of the stuff that's going through my head that may or not, and I don't normally share this stuff with people on videos because it always comes back to bite me. But when Jesus came out of the city of Refuge, it was kind of indicative of something related to the video I just posted called The Two Brothers. You know, we've got this war between God's kingdom and Satan's empire, and that's all that the Bible is about. It's a written history of the war between God's kingdom and Satan's empire, a written history of the war between the angels, the wicked angels, and the righteous angels. It's a written history of the war between civilization and creation. But another way to think of it is the war between Jesus's angels and Satan's angels. And the video that I just did about the two brothers, which included information about the prodigal son, indicates that, you know, even though the prodigal son did a lot of bad stuff, is that the brother was not completely innocent of all sin. You know, when his brother came back and his dad said, go kill a fatted calf, the brother was complaining. You know, that brother represented Jesus. Well, in this story, here's the real Jesus. He's coming out of the city of Refuge. It may be that he was living in the city of Refuge just as a sign that a lot of what's happened is partially his fault. Remember, it was Satan, in my video, The Two Brothers, Satan usurped Jesus' authority. Jesus was appointed as the king of God's kingdom, and yet it is Satan that took over control of the earth. Somehow, Jesus bears some of the responsibility for that taking place. That's all I'm saying. And look, as time goes on, maybe we'll figure more out about this. I'm sharing this with you so that while I'm thinking about it, you can be thinking about it too. And pretty much that's it. So until I make my next video on this here unscripted playlist, if you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.